Imagine walking into a really high-stakes professional meeting. You pull out a document that's designed to sell your entire life's work.
Right, your home career on a page.
Exactly. And then you realize it is legally forbidden from showing what you look like or, how old you are or even where you're from.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. I mean, in almost any other country, a document stripped of that much identity is basically a redacted legal file.
Oh, absolutely. It looks like a classified government document.
But if you are stepping into the job market in the United States, well, that highly sanitized, strictly formatted piece of paper is just your resume. It's your entry ticket.
And there's a very specific kind of ticket.
Right. And the reality is, getting a job in the U.S. feels less like a straightforward, transaction of skills for money and entirely like an unwritten, high-stakes, full-time job of its own.
It really is an intricate ecosystem. I mean, we tend to view hiring through a purely utilitarian lens, right?
Like a company has a problem, you fix it.
Exactly. A company needs a problem solved, and you have the specific skills to solve it. But when you look closely at the American process, it is not merely a bureaucratic exchange of labor for monetary compensation.
Right. It's way more complicated than that.
It is a highly specific cultural ritual. It has incredibly strict, albeit almost entirely unspoken, rules.
And decoding those unspoken rules is exactly our mission for this deep dive. So welcome.
We are so glad you're here with us.
We really are. And today, we are exploring some phenomenal insights gathered from the Clear English podcast series. They focus heavily on navigating the American corporate landscape.
And they have this brilliant framing for it, don't they?
They do. They call the whole intimidating process the American job search cultural dance.
I just love that phrase, cultural dance.
It's perfect. We're going to take all those counterintuitive rules of the American hiring process, the exact things no one explicitly tells you, but everyone absolutely expects you to know.
Because if you don't know them, you're going to step on some toes.
Exactly. We're going to break down the psychology, the history, and the mechanics behind them. The goal is to transform this whole process for you.
Because it can be so overwhelming.
Oh, totally. If you don't understand the underlying logic of the hiring market, it feels like a blindfolded obstacle course.
Just bumping into walls, yeah.
But once you see the machinery underneath, well, it becomes a system you can actually navigate and master.
That framing of a cultural dance is just, it's crucial to hold on to.
Yeah.
Because it reminds us that none of this is objective reality.
Right. It's not a universal law of nature.
No, not at all. The American job search is deeply embedded in a specific flavor of American corporate culture. If you do not know the expected rhythm of this process, you are going to misstep.
Regardless of how good you are at your actual job.
Exactly. Regardless of how objectively brilliant you might be at the actual day-to-day requirements of the role. You are being evaluated not just on your capability, but on your fluency in this specific professional language.
So let's start right at the beginning of that language. Because before you can even get in the room to make your case, you need to secure the invitation.
The golden ticket.
Right. And in the professional world, that invitation relies entirely on your resume. But looking through these notes from the source, the American version of this document has some staggering omissions compared to global norms.
It really does. It's almost defined by what's missing.
Yeah, it is defined almost entirely by what you are explicitly prohibited from including.
Yes, the resume is the very first filter.
Yeah?
And it serves as a massive cultural litmus test right out of the gate.
So what's the biggest rule there?
Well, the foundational rule we see highlighted is the implementation of what is essentially an anti-discrimination shield. Absolutely no photographs.
Zero photos.
Zero. And no personal demographic information. I mean, no age, no marital status, no nationality, no religion.
Which is just wild when you contrast it with international standards.
Oh, it's a complete shock for a lot of people.
If you look at a European CV or, resumes in many parts of Asia or Latin America, they function almost like a professional dating profile.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. Like you have a professional headshot right at the top, a personal bio, your date of birth, and sometimes even your family status or the number of kids you have.
Because the intent in those cultures is to give the employer a holistic, three-dimensional picture of who you are as a human being.
Right. They want to know the whole person. But the American resume operates completely differently. It's like a blind taste test.
I love that analogy, a blind taste test.
Yeah. All the packaging, all the branding, all the visual and personal identity is just aggressively stripped away.
The blind taste test is perfect because it gets right to the heart of American employment law and, frankly, corporate risk mitigation.
Ah, risk mitigation. That's the key phrase.
It is. The core of this rule is to avoid discrimination. Or, crucially, to avoid even the appearance or the liability of discrimination.
Because lawsuits are expensive.
Incredibly expensive. American legal structures around hiring are highly punitive regarding bias. Therefore, companies need to be able to definitively, mathematically prove that they are advancing candidates based purely on skills, experience, and merit.
I see. Because the moment a hiring manager sees a photograph or, a graduation year that heavily hints at your age, unconscious bias immediately enters the equation.
Unconscious bias, or frankly, conscious bias. And from a corporate perspective, that introduces massive legal and financial risk.
Right. They don't even want the temptation there.
Exactly. By removing the photo, the age, the nationality, the burden of proof shifts entirely away from your personal identity and lands squarely on your professional elbow.
It forces them to just look at the raw data.
Yes. It forces the person reading the document to evaluate the raw ingredients of your career history without being swayed by the packaging.
But, that creates a fascinating paradox for you, the applicant.
How so?
Well, because while it creates a theoretically level playing field, it also means your words have to do an impossible amount of heavy lifting.
Oh, that is very true.
You cannot rely on a warm, friendly smile in a photograph to make a good first impression. You cannot rely on the context of your personal background. You are literally reduced to text on a page.
Which brings up the next major hurdle identified in the sources.
Right, the shift from a passive historical record to an active marketing document.
This is where the vast majority of highly qualified candidates just stumble. The natural instinct, especially if you come from an academic background or a more traditional corporate culture, is to write a resume as a passive list of duties.
Like a historical ledger.
Exactly. You treat it like a historical ledger. You list your job title, and beneath it, you write out the exact job description you were handed on your first day.
Right. It reads like a list of chores, like responsible for managing the company's social media accounts. Or tasked with organizing weekly team meetings.
It's very dry.
Super dry. But wait, if I am looking at a single, highly restricted piece of paper where I can't even show my face, how exactly do I turn a boring list of daily duties into a compelling sales pitch?
That's the million-dollar question.
I mean, how do you make that transition without crossing the line into pure fiction or just sounding incredibly arrogant?
It requires a fundamental shift in how you view your own labor. You have to move from a state of passive existence to a state of active impact.
Okay, active impact. I like that.
The American resume is not a history textbook. It is a marketing billboard. Let's look at the psychology of the example provided in the text.
Okay, let's hear it.
So the passive, ineffective way of writing it is responsible for managing the company's social media accounts.
The phrase responsible for is just the absolute killer there.
Why do you say that?
Well, it just means someone in authority told you to do it. It offers zero commentary on whether you actually did it well.
That's entirely true.
I mean, you could have been responsible for the social media accounts and posted nothing but typos that drove the company's stock price into the ground.
Precisely. It denotes an obligation, not an achievement. Now, the source gives us the transformed American-style marketing version of that exact same job.
Let's hear the upgrade.
It reads, manage 4 social media accounts, growing follower engagement by 15% in 6 months.
Wow. The difference in how the brain processes that second sentence is just remarkable.
It really is. Let's break down the mechanics of why it works so effectively on the human brain. Specifically, the brain of a stressed, overworked hiring manager.
Right, because they are just scanning these things.
Exactly. It relies on 2 structural pillars, strong action verbs, and quantifiable results. Notice the verbs. Managed, growing.
They sound so much more energetic.
They are dynamic. They imply forward momentum, agency, and ownership. You aren't just a vessel receiving orders. You are the engine driving the result.
But the quantifiable results are really the secret weapon here, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Like 4 accounts, 15%, 6 months. When I hear those numbers, my brain instinctively just relaxes.
Because it removes the guesswork. Right.
It prefers that second version because numbers act as empirical proof. They take the incredibly abstract, subjective concept of being, quote unquote, good at social media, and they ground it in undeniable, measurable reality.
Yes. It changes the whole conversation.
It really does. It changes it from, please trust me, I am competent, to here is the mathematical proof of the value I generated for my previous employer.
And that mathematical proof addresses the core anxiety of the hiring process. Risk. We have to remember that for an employer, hiring is fundamentally an exercise in risk mitigation.
It's terrifying for them, too.
Very much so. Bringing a new person into an organization costs tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars when you factor in salary, benefits, onboarding, and training.
So they want a sure bet.
Right. A resume that is just a list of duties leaves a massive amount of risk on the table. It's the risk that you are merely a seat warmer.
Just showing up to collect a paycheck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a resume packed with quantifiable achievements significantly lowers that perceived risk. It signals to the employer, hey, this person understands that their ultimate purpose in this building is to generate positive outcomes, not just fulfill a job description.
Okay, so you understand the rules of the paper. You strip the resume of all personal details. You purge the passive language. You load it up with dynamic action verbs and impressive percentages.
We've got a great marketing document.
Right. The marketing document does its job perfectly, and you get the invitation. You are called in for the interview.
Step 2.
But the moment you walk into that room or, log on to that video call, the rules change again. The metrics that got you in the door are suddenly not enough to get you the job.
The resume proves that you have the theoretical capability. It proves the what. The interview is designed to uncover the how.
And in the American corporate landscape, that is almost entirely executed through the behavioral interview, right?
Yes, the behavioral interview is everywhere.
This is a phenomenon that catches so many people completely off guard. American interviewers rely obsessively on behavioral questions.
They really do.
These are not hypothetical inquiries. They aren't asking, well, how would you theoretically handle a difficult client?
No, they want proof.
Exactly. Instead, they demand historical proof. They look at you and say, tell me about a specific time you had a conflict with a coworker and how you resolved it. Or, tell me about a time you failed to meet a critical deadline.
The philosophical shift behind this interviewing methodology is profound. And it took over corporate America a few decades ago for a very specific reason.
What's the core assumption there?
The underlying assumption driving behavioral interviewing is that past behavior is the only truly reliable predictor of future behavior.
I mean, because hypotheticals are essentially useless, right?
Pretty much.
If you ask me how I would handle a conflict, I am just going to give you the idealized, perfectly rational textbook answer. I am going to tell you exactly what you want to hear because I have an imagination.
Exactly. Hypothetical questions test your imagination and maybe your understanding of corporate etiquette. Behavioral questions test your actual lived reality.
Which is much messier.
Way messier. When an employer asks a behavioral question, they know your resume says you have excellent project management skills. They want to see the mechanisms of your problem solving in real time.
They want the behind-the-scenes footage.
Right. They want to see the messy reality of how you operate when things go wrong, when budgets are slashed, or when personalities really clash.
I completely understand the psychological logic from the employer side. I mean, it makes perfect sense. But looking at this from the perspective of you, the listener, sitting in that chair, this is incredibly intimidating.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It induces a massive amount of performance anxiety. You're sitting there in a high-stakes environment. Someone looks you dead in the eye and says, tell me about a time your project failed.
And your mind just goes blank.
Completely empties. You forget your own middle name, let alone a perfectly articulated anecdote from a random Tuesday 3 years ago.
It's the fight or flight response.
Exactly. So I have to wonder, is this methodology actually testing a candidate's professional competence? Or is it merely testing their memory and their ability to perform under intense conversational pressure?
That is a very valid critique of the system. And the honest answer is that it tests both.
Okay, so the pressure is part of the point.
It absolutely tests how you handle pressure and ambiguity. But more importantly, from the perspective of modern American business culture, it tests your ability to structure complex, chaotic information and communicate it clearly to stakeholders.
Right, because that's what you do on the job every day.
Yes. In today's knowledge economy, that ability is a core professional competence, regardless of whether you are an engineer, a marketer, or an accountant.
You have to be able to explain things.
If you cannot clearly articulate the narrative of your own past experiences, the interviewer will unconsciously assume you will also struggle to articulate project updates, client pitches, or internal strategies to the team.
Okay, so you are essentially proving your executive function in real time.
Precise.
But acknowledging that interview panic is a very real biological response. You need a strategy to bypass that freeze response. And the sources provide an absolute lifeline here.
A literal formula to save you.
Yeah, a framework designed specifically to organize your brain when the adrenaline hits.
Yes, the STAR method. It is the gold standard. It is the definitive framework for navigating the behavioral interview.
STAR, right.
Yes. If you are entering the American job market, this acronym needs to be second nature. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result.
I like to think of using the STAR method as basically acting as the director of a mini-movie for the interviewers.
Oh, I like that comparison.
You are the protagonist, and you are forcing your chaotic memories into a highly digestible, satisfying narrative arc. So let's break down the choreography of this step by step.
Let's do it.
First up, S for situation.
The situation is your establishing shot. You are briefly describing the context of the story. Where were you working? What was the overarching project? Who were the key stakeholders?
And keep it short, right?
The critical word here is briefly. You are just giving the interviewer the coordinates so they understand the landscape. You do not want to spend 3 minutes explaining the intricate organizational chart of your previous company.
Right. No one cares about the org chart. You are just setting the stage so we know if this story takes place in a burning building or a quiet library.
Exactly.
Then we move seamlessly into T, the task.
The task defines the specific conflict or goal within that situation. What was the exact problem that needed solving? What were the stakes if you failed?
Give me an example of a task.
For example, you might say, we were 2 weeks away from a major product launch, and our primary supplier suddenly went bankrupt.
Ooh, high stakes.
That is the task. That's the mountain you suddenly had to climb. It establishes the tension of the narrative.
Which leads perfectly into the climax of the movie, the A, the action. And this is where the sources stress you need to spend the vast majority of your time.
Absolutely. The action is the core of the answer. This is where you detail the specific, granular steps you took to resolve the task.
The actual real work you did.
Right. It is where you demonstrate your technical skills, your critical thinking, your emotional intelligence, and your initiative. You walk them through your decision-making process.
So you're saying, like, first I did this, then I did that.
Yes. First, I audited our secondary suppliers. Then, I negotiated an expedited contract. Finally, I reorganized the internal team's workflow to accommodate the delay.
When you utilize this structure, it completely eliminates that terrifying, aimless rambling.
We've all done it.
We've all been there. You start talking, you go on a tangent, 5 minutes pass, and you suddenly realize you haven't actually answered the prompt. The interviewer is just staring at you.
It's a horrible feeling.
It's the worst. But the STAR method forces a beginning, a middle, and an end.
And that narrative arc is vital, because human cognition is fundamentally wired for stories. We do not easily retain disconnected lists of facts or vague assertions of competence. We remember narratives.
The brain loves a good story.
It does. By framing your professional experience as a structured story, you make your specific value memorable. But there is a crucial, incredibly subtle detail within this action phase that trips up a massive number of candidates.
Oh, this is the really interesting part.
Especially international candidates, and even many American candidates who are naturally collaborative.
Yes, this is the I versus we distinction. And it is fascinating because it strikes right at the heart of cultural differences in the workplace.
It really does. The strict instruction in the American context is that you must explicitly use the pronoun I instead of we when describing the actions taken.
Which feels so strange to some people.
If you come from a culture that heavily prioritizes the collective over the individual, or if you are simply a person who values team harmony, saying I did this and I solved that feels incredibly unnatural.
It feels wrong.
It can feel abrasive, arrogant, or just boastful.
It feels like you are completely throwing your colleagues under the bus. Like if I was part of a 5-person task force that saved a project, sitting in an interview and saying I single-handedly rescued the launch feels dishonest.
But you're taking all the glory.
Yeah. It feels like I'm stealing credit.
It is a totally understandable friction point.
Yeah.
But we have to look at why this hyper-individualism is absolutely necessary to navigate the American hiring process.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The hiring panel is not interviewing your former team. They cannot hire your former team. They are evaluating you, and they need to isolate your specific variables.
They need to know what pieces you actually touched.
Exactly. They need to understand exactly what your unique contribution was to that success.
So it's not about being arrogant, it's really about clarity.
Precisely. In American corporate culture, claiming individual ownership of an action or a success is not viewed as arrogance. It is viewed as taking responsibility, demonstrating leadership, and possessing agency.
Huh. That's a huge mindset shift.
If you constantly hide behind we decided, we implemented, we solved, the interviewer is left with a fatal ambiguity.
Because they're thinking, well, who is we?
Right. They're left wondering if you were the driving force behind the solution, or if you were just a passenger in the room while someone else did the heavy lifting. You have to clearly define your own boundaries of impact.
You have to claim your space in the narrative. You are the protagonist of the mini-movie. And then finally, the screen fades to black with the R in the STAR method, the result.
The result is the concrete outcome of your actions.
Yeah.
What was ultimately accomplished.
Yeah.
Did you save the account? Did you launch the product?
And we are back to numbers here, aren't we?
Yes. Crucially, the sources heavily emphasize returning to the logic of the resume here. Use quantifiable numbers to anchor the result whenever possible.
So don't just say, it went great.
Right. Do not just offer a vague conclusion like, well, in the end, the project was a great success.
Because success is completely subjective.
Exactly. Instead, you say, as a result of my renegotiation strategy, we launched the product on time and actually saved 10% on our anticipated supply costs.
Boom. You are wrapping that compelling narrative up with a neat, mathematically proven bow. It is incredibly satisfying for the listener.
It leaves no doubt in their mind.
But there's an overarching piece of actionable advice here that just cannot be ignored. You cannot improvise this.
Oh, definitely not.
You have to practice your STAR stories before you ever step foot in the interview room. You cannot sit down and just hope a perfectly structured, mathematically sound narrative about a time you overcame adversity magically pops into your head under pressure.
Preparation is arguably the most critical metric being evaluated, even if it's completely invisible to you in the moment.
How many stories should you have ready?
By having 5 or 6 versatile STAR stories mapped out in your head, covering successes, failures, conflicts, and leadership moments, you prove to the employer that you are an organized, strategic thinker.
You're not just winging it.
Right. It demonstrates that you respect the opportunity enough to actually prepare for it.
Okay, let's look at the timeline. You, the listener, have executed perfectly so far.
You're doing great.
You formatted the resume flawlessly, stripping out the personal data and loading it with quantifiable impact. You got the interview, you walked into the room, they hit you with the behavioral questions, and you didn't freeze.
You nailed it.
You confidently directed your STAR method mini-movies, claiming your individual impact with I statements. You shake hands, you log off the call, or you walk out of the corporate lobby.
The hard part is done.
The interview is officially over. The natural human instinct is to completely collapse, exhale, and assume your part in the dance is done.
But the dance is not over.
Wait, really?
There's one final, highly strategic step. A hidden move that happens after the music has ostensibly stopped.
The 24-hour rule. The post-interview thank you note. The standard expectation is that within 24 hours of the interview concluding, the candidate must send a brief, personalized email to every single person they spoke with.
Every single one.
Now, let's look at this skeptically for a moment, all right? In an era of automated applicant tracking systems, artificial intelligence screening, and highly complex corporate hiring matrices, are we really still relying on a 1950s etiquette routine?
I know it sounds outdated.
I mean, is sending a digital thank you card really necessary? Doesn't a flawlessly executed hour-long interview basically speak for itself?
It is a pervasive and very dangerous misconception that the interview speaks for itself.
Really? Why is that dangerous?
An interview is just a collection of raw data points generated in real time. The thank you note is your opportunity to provide the final synthesis of that data.
Oh, interesting.
We have to stop viewing the thank you note through the lens of polite etiquette or just, good manners. In the American business context, it is a highly strategic, calculated maneuver.
So what is it, if not manners?
It is essentially a B2B sales follow-up. You are the business, and they are the prospective client.
That reframing changes everything. It's not a courtesy, it's a closing argument.
Precisely. Let's look at the cognitive psychology of the hiring panel for a second.
Okay, put us in their shoes.
By the time they have interviewed 5, 10, or 15 candidates for a role, they are experiencing massive decision fatigue, memories blur, candidates blend together.
I imagine it's just a sea of faces by Friday.
It really is. The thank you note arrives in their inbox the next morning, and it leverages the recency effect. It pulls your name right back to the top of their cognitive stack just as they're sitting down to deliberate.
And it proves a baseline level of executive function, right? It proves you have follow-through. You didn't just walk out the door and immediately mentally clock out.
It demonstrates professionalism, organization, and a genuine sustained interest in the role.
Yeah.
But strategically, it acts as a final, completely uncontested marketing touch point.
You have the floor one last time.
Exactly. You have a captive audience for 3 sentences. It is your last chance to briefly reiterate a core strength, clarify a point you feel you didn't fully explain in the room, or express enthusiasm for a specific, nuanced project the interviewer mentioned.
And here is the detail from the research that is genuinely astounding to me. A massive percentage of candidates simply skip this step.
It is shocking how many people ignore it.
Let's unpack the tragedy of that. You go through the agonizing hours of tailoring the resume, the intense stress of the behavioral interview, the mental gymnastics of recalling star narratives under pressure, and then you forfeit the game at the 1-yard line because you don't want to spend 4 minutes drafting a polite email.
It happens constantly, even at the highest levels of executive hiring. And that is exactly why it is such a disproportionately powerful tool for the candidates who actually utilize it.
It might be the single most efficient competitive advantage in the modern job market. I mean, if half of your competition simply fades into the background after the interview and you send a sharp professional follow-up, you have instantly elevated your standing purely through the mechanics of follow-through.
It's such an easy win.
It requires absolutely zero extra technical talent, just a tiny fraction of effort, and it allows you to stand out in a crowded field. It signals to the employer that you understand the complete, holistic life cycle of professional communication.
It proves you understand that the relationship doesn't end when the meeting is over. And in a corporate environment, that is a highly valued trait.
So bringing all of these intricate threads together, if you are stepping into this market, the path forward requires a deep understanding of these specific mechanics.
You really have to know the steps.
It is about recognizing that you are participating in a highly structured system. You start by crafting a strictly professional, hyper-focused resume. You abandon the holistic personal profile in favor of dynamic action verbs and undeniable, quantifiable results that actively mitigate employer risk.
That gets you in the door.
Then you mentally prepare for the psychological shift of the behavioral interview, utilizing the STAR framework to transform chaotic memories into compelling narratives, and culturally adapting to claim your individual successes.
And then the final move.
Right. And finally, you secure your competitive edge by treating the 24-hour thank you email not as an afterthought of etiquette, but as a strategic closing argument.
The overarching lesson here is one of empowerment through understanding. Yes, the American hiring process is a complex, sometimes unnatural, and highly pressurized system.
It's definitely not easy.
But once you realize that it operates on a specific set of rules, once you learn the choreography of the dance, it ceases to be a mystery.
It becomes manageable.
Understanding and actively preparing for these cultural expectations shifts you from being a passive applicant, merely hoping to be selected, into an active, strategic participant orchestrating your own professional success. You gain a massive, measurable advantage simply by speaking the language better than the person sitting next to you.
And that leaves us with a lingering, somewhat provocative question for you to mull over as you navigate your own professional journey.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we have just spent all this time analyzing how mastering the American job search relies obsessively on this highly structured communication.
Right, all the marketing and framing.
Yeah, marketing your absolute best self with aggressive action verbs, claiming individual ownership of success, and packaging your messy lived experiences into perfectly directed, mathematically sound narratives.
That's a lot of work.
It is. So if simply getting your foot in the door requires this intense strategic level of self-marketing, how much of actual long-term career success in the U.S. is simply the ongoing daily ability to continuously communicate your own value?
That is a fascinating point.
Does this elaborate cultural dance ever really stop once you sign the employment contract? Or is getting the job just the final dress rehearsal for the rest of your career?
Something to really think about.
Definitely. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.